Welcome back to the Prison Architect tutorial series here on the channel. I'm your host, longtime listener. Be sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and comment below. In this series or in this episode, we are going to cover visitation and parole. There's a lot more going on here than I really expected, so we're going to kind of keep an eye on some things here as we go. But in general, the thing to kind of keep in mind with needs for visitation is that it's got to be indoors and have either a visitor table or a visitor booth. Now, an interesting, I guess, mechanic is that the second the inmate sits down at the table, their need for family is immediately fulfilled. So that's interesting. Now, visitor tables, obviously more visitors can come in, so that's one thing, but also they are a little bit less effective at stopping contraband. So this is an area where a lot of contraband can show up, and we'll talk about why more in a second. Um, Visitors should only, or inmates should only go to visit during free time hours. So sometimes they will disobey that, but that's how it's supposed to work. So something to keep in mind as far as number of tables that you're going to have and the amount of actual free time that you give your inmates. You always want to try and avoid having either visitation or parole really anywhere near an exit to the building, especially visitation, because if the visitation room is like right inside the entrance, just because you don't want visitors going very far into your facility for whatever reason, if it's close to that exit, those inmates every once in a while are going to try and make a break for it. It is key that you have metal detectors in here. Also, probably a good idea to have a canine stationed in here to sniff out contraband. And some of the reason why you want to have that stuff in the visitation room is that visitors do not carry contraband into the facility. But once they get into the visitation room, magically the mechanics of the game just spawn contraband on that person. So you want to have these security measures actually in the room to try and stop that from happening. And then probably also a good idea, like if you have your inmates going out this door, also have, see, like I have a visitor door here, but that person went over here and just used that one so that they didn't have to wait for the guard. In any case, have metal detectors. As you can see right there, he set it off because the inmate, his visitation crew brought him some contraband apparently. Let's see if the guard will actually catch it. Ready for this? Nope. So apparently he set off he wants drugs, and the metal detector was set off, but somehow our guard didn't find any drugs. And it says he needs rest, so maybe he's a little bit tired, and that's why he wasn't able to find it. But anyway, the last thing that I will mention about visitation is that guards are a good idea in here because visitors can get angry, or inmates can get angry, and they will try to rage kill their guests. So you want to have a guard stationed in the room or at least nearby to prevent something like that from going down. Now on to parole. The needs for a parole room has got to be 5x5, indoors, and have a visitor table. Can't be a visitor booth, it's got to be the table, because in the parole hearings, you're going to have the parole officer as well as the lawyer. The lawyer is obviously advocating for the prisoner to get out. The parole officer is the one that is going to make the call as to whether or not that happens. You also have to set up parole in your programs tab and your reports, so don't forget to do that once you have the parole room set up. I like to have a bunch of parole rooms and then a bunch of slots open for that, because essentially how the mechanics work in terms of when they actually have their parole hearings, when they have served 50% of their sentence, they get their first parole hearing. If they don't get released at that point, they get another parole hearing at 75% of their sentence served. So that's how the mechanics work there. You can influence the chances of their release right here by having the slider adjusted either way up to where, but doesn't matter how likely they are to reoffend, you just cut them loose, or you can crank it way down to where they never get parole. I like to keep mine around 10%, mainly because there are some penalties that can kick in if you have too many people that reoffend. I think this normally starts at like 20%. I crank it down because I don't want them reoffending, especially if you have failure conditions on. So when an inmate is released, if they don't reoffend, you get a $3,000 bonus, which is awesome. However, if you're playing with failure conditions and you have too many inmates that get released and then reoffend, I think it's once you hit 5, you get a warning from your CEO, and then if it gets to 10, and I don't know if that's over a certain period of time or what, but basically, if you get too many, you can get fired. So obviously, you don't want that. There are also some fines, from what I understand, that go into that, but I've never really seen it because I'm just usually not watching the daily cash flow. But anyway, there are fines and penalties that can go down if you have too many guys that reoffend. So, what else here? Oh, death row appeals. So if you have death row in an execution room, the appeals, I'm not exactly sure when they happen. I didn't see anything as far as that mechanic, but it is a fixed cutoff rate of reoffending chance of 5%. You can't adjust that in a slider. This is not like it has its own hidden slider. It's at 5%. However, if you go into the legal tab here, death row, you can basically add that one and execution liability, and it will, I believe, raise that slider to 10% instead of 5%. So that's that. I think that's how that works, but I believe you have got to have both of those to increase that percentage up to 10% so that those guys get released, or basically their death row sentence gets appealed. They may stay in prison but be dropped down to just a maximum security inmate instead of a death row inmate. So that's how that works. Last thing that I will say is it is a good idea to have guards in here, because if they don't get parole, they can get angry and go after the parole officer. So you don't want that. So you want to have a guard stationed at least very close, if not in the room. And then it's also a good idea to have CCTV set up to help, limit the odds of something like that happening. So that's it for Visitation and Parole. I hope that this was helpful. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, comment below, and we'll see y'all next time.